with that, I'd like to welcome Rory up to the stage to tell us a little bit more about some of the work that CORDAP hopes to accomplish over the next few years.
Thanks very much, Tom and David. With that introduction, I don't really need to say very much, I think. So I'm just going to introduce CORDAP briefly. We have opened a call and just on the current activities. There's another talk, I think, on Thursday morning. If you're more interested in the call and the criteria about applying, you can come along to that. So what is CORDAP and why is it needed? I mean, basically, it was recognized during the kind of Saudi presidency of the G20 that there was a vast funding gap in terms of research and development for coral restoration. And if you look at worldwide, there's over $2.47 trillion spent globally on research and development. However, ocean coral and reef research remains incredibly underfunded, and even the activities, as Gator pointed out earlier on. So CORDAP has a G20 and global initiative. We have the two goals. One is to significantly increase the funding available for research and development in coral restoration, and the other one is to deploy that into programs, R&D programs or projects that build on and complement existing national and international activities, and like the RAP program would be a primary example of one we're trying to build on. They've done an awful lot of work in a similar space. We want to ensure the outputs are usable, affordable, and available to those who need them most, and you see that's one of the criteria in the call as well. It's a not-for-profit foundation. It's going to be funded by voluntary contributions. Its target is a minimum of $30 million a year to deploy directly onto R&D projects. And Saudi Arabia's founding contribution is $100 million over the 10 years. So that's the funding we're using to kickstart and hopefully to build a bit of show and tell to attract funding from other countries and philanthropies. It's internationally governed with an independent expert scientific guidance. So we have two committees, a governing committee. We have Jennifer Koss here, who's our vice chair from NOAA. And actually David Mead is the chair of our scientific advisory board. So we have very good governance and scientific guidance. KAUST contribution actually is to resource the administration of the platform. So they stuck up their hand and volunteered to say, look, we can run it out of KAUST if you want. We'll fund the submission process, the people, the organization. And so 100% of all the donations will actually go on projects. So if somebody donates $1 million, that $1 million will go directly to R&D projects. And that actually costs KAUST about $2 million a year. So it's quite a significant contribution. Just briefly, the members and partners. We have a lot of the G20 members who formed and developed the idea. They have a founding committee, which is now handed over to our governing committee. We have a lot of distinguished organizations and agencies and are still looking for more collaborations in that area who are extremely good at advising the IGC on all the matters, and they will approve all the projects and funding and make sure everything is kind of tied up and coherent. We recently published a strategic plan, which the Scientific Advisory Committee spent an awful lot of time developing, so we're extremely grateful for that. We've kind of moved very quickly in this whole thing. We started this about a year ago, so to open a call now just shows the amount of work that the Scientific and Advisory Committee have put in since then. So this will identify how we'll deliver on the goals and objectives, describes the approaches, focuses on the most pressing needs, and also outlines areas where we want coral R&D roadmaps. So there's certain areas, like deep water corals would be one, assisted adaptation is another, where a roadmap, a kind of technology roadmap would be extremely useful. So it'll show a timeline and promising directions of research, what else is needed. So it also gives maybe people a head start in dealing with the regulatory matters and looking down the line to say, well, look, we envision this technology is going to be available in 5 years and we'd like to deploy it. What do we need to do now from a regulatory perspective? All this is available on our website as well at cordap.org if anybody wants to see it. So our main current activities and plans, we have just launched the Coral Accelerator program. It's an open call. I have a few slides on that, and there's another talk on Thursday. The scoping studies and roadmaps, which is underway, we've just started 2 of them. We're going to have workshops very soon. I think a lot of people here might be invited to join into those workshops, but also to collaborate and look at the outputs of those and make sure that they are aligned with what's going on in the world at the moment in their areas. This will build on existing bodies of work and new analysis. I know the Coral Restoration Consortium are producing an awful lot of work across the board in terms of analysis and roadmaps and guides. And these would deliver actionable roadmaps, as we said, to guide future funding and line activities. Originally, it was more because CORDAP wasn't really sure exactly which direction or which priority to put down in these areas. And so a roadmap, a 6-month project, produce a roadmap, which will be distributed around the world, will give us guidance. Our current scoping studies, and there's more open ones for any ideas. I think one was on valuing reefs, which is very important in terms of us making the argument for R&D funding in the area. So we have deep water corals, assisted adaptation, decision modeling, ecological risk, which David talked a bit about there as well, and innovative aquaculture technology, which we're doing in conjunction with the Susha Island project, in which Gator and Tom are involved in. A large part of what we have to do, and we didn't realize we'd have to do this much on this side, is resourcing the platform, which is the fundraising. So this was a G20 communique come out from all the countries in the G20 saying, yes, we want to do this. We agree to kind of voluntarily fund the program. Saudi Arabia has made that commitment, and that's the foundation commitment, but we still have an awful lot of work to do to kind of get the name out there, make the argument for why research and development and funding research and development in coral is so important. And to get those multi-annual commitments. In fact, we're working a bit with the Global Fund for Coral Reefs on this side as well. They've had a lot of success in fundraising for their activities. So the actual program that we have just launched, it'll fund international collaborative research teams with impactful ideas and high-risk ideas in coral restoration. They can span across the full range from foundational science right through to deployment, translation, transferable, field testing. It has to be R&D projects though. We won't fund kind of just practitioner activities. It's more about kind of building a scalable, transferable, affordable technologies that we can make available to everybody. We have approximately $18 million fund available for this call. Maximum per project is about 1.5 million US dollars, and the projects can run between 1 and 3 years in length. One of the main criteria for this is there has to be a minimum of 3 applicants from 2 countries. Now, one of the countries, or one of the applicants must come from a low or middle income country as defined by the OECD. So we find this a very important principle, and a lot of people have talked about it since even back in the UN Oceans and Lisbon and here. I've been engaging with the coastal communities, engaging with the people on the ground and bringing them in. But it's important to bring them into the earlier stage as well in research and development. Now, that applicant from the low middle income country doesn't have to be a researcher. They can be a user, they can be part of the community, they can be part of the regulatory process, but they must have a significant input. It must be demonstrated what their contribution is. Run out of time? Oh, sorry, okay. So the main thing is, the deadline is November the 1st. There's a talk on Thursday morning, more details. You can give me a shout. In fact, I think there's a good few here from the IGC and the SAC who'll be able to help you as well. And funding notifications will be in May. Okay, so the team, I think the most important thing together is to get a team together, make sure you have a partner from one of the developing countries, and that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. It's definitely really exciting to see all the plans that CORDAP's been putting out. So without further ado, our next presenter is Professor Xavier Irigoyen, who did his PhD at Bordeaux University and has worked in France, the United Kingdom, Spain, and Saudi Arabia in the field of biological oceanography, plankton, and plankton-fish interactions. At present, he's the scientific director of applied marine science at NEOM in Saudi Arabia, and he has published more than 200 papers, including a few good ones. He has supervised or co-supervised about 15 PhDs with a higher percentage of good ones. Come on up.
Thank you, Sarah. Hope that you will be one of those PhD students in the future. So I'm going to talk about NEOM, but first an announcement. Tomorrow there will be at lunchtime a session where there will be much more detail about NEOM. So if the weather allows it, Amir, I don't know where you are, Amir Wida will be organizing it. So be there if you want to know more about NEOM. Second important announcement, I'm not Paul Marshall. Paul Marshall was supposed to give this talk. So if you have good questions, they are for him. So what is NEOM? NEOM is basically a region the size of Belgium, Maryland for the US citizens, that Saudi Arabia wants to develop to diversify its economy. But it wants to develop it in a different way. It wants to develop it with a minimum footprint, using renewable energy, and also being a living laboratory to explore new ways of doing things, new ideas, new ways of developing, new ways of carrying business, and new ways of doing conservation. And this is embedded in NEOM's vision, where all the time new ideas, talent, innovation are in all the things that are being developed over there. And this forms part also in terms of conservation. So NEOM is not as we have done in the past, where we have the development and then conservation came afterwards when we realized that we were destroying things that were important. So at NEOM, the idea is that conservation is embedded in the development, is part of it, is at the basis of it. You don't do something if it is not contributing to that conservation. And now we are sitting here in nice green Florida. Flower is coming from the Spanish word for flowers. And you are wondering what those guys do want to conserve in Saudi Arabia. It's not that just a desert. So it's not. Deserts have a lot of attraction. So there are regions there, as mountains, the upper valleys, the coastal desert, that are spectacular. I can tell you that they are really spectacular. But something that is even more spectacular, at least in my eyes, is the Red Sea. The Red Seas are really, really spectacular, again, is the word, but unique ecosystem. It's really warm, one of the warmest seas in the planet, just behind the Gulf of Arabia, but it's warm to the bottom, and the bottom is 2,000, 3,000 meters. So it's 22 degrees at the bottom of the Red Sea. It's a very unique ecosystem in all senses. You have mangroves, you have corals, but you have also mesophotic corals, you have deep brines in the bottom, you have a lot of different things over there. So NEOM will have about a natural reserve of 25,000 square kilometers that will include the desert, Red Sea, etc. And it's going to be developed, this conservation system is developed into three legs. One is the standard conservation that we know. So this is practically having areas that are protected. Actually, not areas we will see later, 95% of the NEOM region is going to be protected. Not areas. The whole area is protected, and then there are a few small areas that are developed. But then there is also the idea that has been expressed before, that the conservation itself is part of the development, as an experience for people that are visiting the region. So they can use it as an experience, is part of the development. And the third part of it is to create a kind of living laboratory where we can explore new ways of accelerating and transferring solutions to diminish the impacts. And this is what will come in the next talk. So I'm going to jump this, and I'm going to put a small video about the Red Sea so you can see. So basically, as I said before, there is now a plan for marine protected areas in the NEOM region. It's almost ready to be implemented. And as I said before, it's the other way around. 95% of the marine area is going to be protected. It's only 5% that is under development. So it's not what we are using normally, that we are trying to find out how we can have a marine protected area that fits in this region where everything is already developed. Here's the other way around. First is protected, then you can use the rest. And then in the part of contributing to develop new approaches, these scalable approaches, there is a collaboration between NEOM and KAUST to develop a really large coral garden. And this is what our next speaker is going to to talk about. And this is somebody that you probably don't know, Tom Moore, who joined KAUST in 2021 to help to launch this large-scale coral reef conservation effort. This is going to be a showcase of coral reef restoration and a demonstration of how to deliver reef restoration at a really large scale. Actually, the aim is to develop a 100-hectare reefscape adjacent to Sush Island. This is executed between KAUST and NEOM. And then Tom, as you probably, most of them you know, came to KAUST from the NOAA, where he was the coral reef restoration lead. He has worked for more than 20 years on the cutting edge of tropical marine ecosystem conservation, merging science and policy, and Tom is co-chair of the International Coral Restoration Consortium, convener of this Congress, Reef Futures, and Tom, please.